Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dalaran, and in today's video I'll be listing 5 unique specs that barely anybody plays in PvP for the patch 8.3. I'm a huge fan of playing specs that are unique, but when you have unique playstyles or playstyles that are not the meta, some classes are simply easier than others, and if you're trying to gun for a specific rating in arenas, certain classes and specs are simply the easiest ticket out. But I'm someone who doesn't like the easiest path forward. Instead, I prefer carving my own path and playing specs that might be difficult to begin with, might need gear or a lot more practice, but in the end they're far more enjoyable. And in today's video I wanted to share with you guys 5 specs in the current patch right now that are the least played specs of current PvP season, but with the possibility of corruption gear, I feel that honestly this would be the season to turn things around. What makes this season different than others is corruption gear and the lack of tank trinkets. The previous metas of Battle for Azeroth have been defined by any classes that can use tank trinkets and maximizing their effectiveness. So essentially you had classes running around with tank trinkets unable to be killed, and the name of the game was sustainability, but with a variety of tank trinkets being nerfed and healer trinkets not potent enough to replace them, and with the addition of corruption gear as well as a variety of new damage oriented trinkets in the brand new raid, a lot more people are now switching the meta towards a DPS heavy priority. So variety of classes that are tanky are only tanky because that's how they are built, but not because of all these extra doodads and trinkets which really tend to offset the meta heavily. With new corruptions, healers can even participate in damage, so the name of the game right now is to use whatever class abilities you have to survive and use corruptions and your own damage in order to take down your adversary. There's a variety of classes on this list that had the hardest time dealing with tanky classes, and with proper corruptions and with the right stats could finally shine. So let's take a look at some of those classes that could potentially be good in this new patch. We're gonna start off with Marksmanship Hunter, and Marksmanship right now makes up about 0.2% of the entire PvP population. Now, it is really difficult to track anybody that ever does PvP. Like, it's impossible to find out just how many people do battlegrounds and how many of them are particularly marksmanship hunters. But we do have access to arena numbers, so these are the numbers that we'll be utilizing in this video. However, the numbers could be particularly bigger in battlegrounds, and I would say I've seen more marksmanship hunters in BGs than I have ever in arenas, although I have seen some. Now, marksmanship hunters are not insanely amazing, their damage is very inconsistent, and I feel like when you play a marksmanship hunter, they really suffer from a lack of stats, and sometimes a lack of consistent damage or burst damage can also go a long way. Now, marksmanship generally relies on its allies in order to help set up for kills, since marksmanship doesn't have a stun like the other hunter specs. Even Beast Mastery, I would say, has a better chance than marksmanship when it comes to pure 1v1 situations. However, marksman isn't really all about control. It is supposed to be designed as a glass cannon playstyle. You have quite a bit of damage. You can also even keep doing damage to enemies while you're line of sighting them, quite good mobility, as well as quite good burst damage if the enemy lets you get your cast off. And you can't be interrupted, so if you treat it like a Destruction Warlock without the fears, it essentially plays like a Destruction Warlock without the fears. Now with corruptions, you get access to lots of secondary stats, and if you gear yourself properly, that's a lot of extra versatility, haste, and mastery that will all let you do more damage. You also have other corruptions that will let you add plain, flat out burst damage or more consistent damage if that's how you want to. So I feel like for Marksmanship Hunter, that's incredibly powerful because damage is where it lacks, but with extra corruptions, it might help you fill in a few of the gaps. The next class on this list is going to be Affliction Warlock. Now, they are pretty equal with Demonology Warlocks as well. However, in my experience, I've seen far more Demonology Warlocks within arenas than I have Affliction Warlocks. If I were to make this video based on spec by spec by spec basis, honestly, I could put all the tank specs in here and maybe Holy Priest, but instead I want to focus on damage specs, the ones that you will see in arenas the most, the specs that Blizzard tries to balance out for the general PvP. So we'll go with Affliction, and not to rename Warlocks multiple times in a row, Demonology is also quite rare on this list. Affliction as a spec probably has the least amount of pressure of the other specs of Warlock. I would say this started, honestly, after Legion, after they changed up Affliction to be a lot more focused on the extra filler damage from casting Shadow Bolts as well as other abilities, where Agony and Corruption by themselves just were not enough. And this is where I feel like this spec really started going downhill. However, the Affliction Warlock, this patch could potentially be quite good, as there's a lot of corruptions that can proc off of your dots. Some of these corruptions can proc off of multiple dots, so if you spread your damage over time to just about everybody and focus on maintaining those dots, you essentially could truly rot down the enemy team. That's what Affliction has always been really good at, is rotting down the enemy team, making sure that everybody is taking quite high sustainable damage, making it harder for healers to want to heal this damage and want to dispel it, which opens themselves up for a trap to silence themselves. And if they don't dispel the UAs, which are going to be doing damage, but also increasing the amount of damage enemies take as well. So Affliction Warlocks, I feel like in this patch in particular, with a proper build, could do quite well. The dot damage they put out, as well as with corruptions and proper procs, could give them quite a little bit extra oomph that they needed in order to be viable in PvP. Number 3 class on this list is gonna have to be the Enhancement Shaman. If we were talking about Elemental Shamans, Elementals are kind of almost everywhere. Restoration Shamans also really not bad either, but Enhancement is the one spec you barely ever see. Enhancement was one of the specs that was very much crippled by the meta of previous BFA seasons, where every class was all about being as tanky as possible, and Shaman was one of those classes that was basically by default really squishy. Even with tank trinkets, you really did have to have your healer tunnel some healing in order to keep you alive through a variety of different comps and a variety of different challenges. There's a lot of classes that could just shred through a Shaman, but they really do have a fun playstyle. The rotation and the resource generation and the procs keeps things very exciting and spicy, and that's what I really like about Enhance. And with this brand new patch, with everybody dropping their tank trinkets, everybody starts to take more damage. So as a Shaman, it's not like you are any less squishy, you still are very much a glass cannon, but the cannon part can shine more with everybody not being nearly as tanky. So this, I think, is going to be perfect for Shaman, plus with corruptions, because they play so well with secondary stats, just about any corruption is going to be a benefit for them. So with a couple decent corruptions and a decent healer, and knowing that the character is going to take a bunch of damage, Shamans could really go back to being a full-on blasting glass cannon that can do quite a bit of damage in AoE. You might think this one is weird, but on this list, number 4 is going to be Arcane Mage. You probably have seen quite a bit of Arcane Mages here and there. You might even run into Arcane Mages in arenas, and you've seen how well they do. Hell, if you are a fan of the 5-5 1-1 duels that we do here regularly on this channel, Fridays and Saturdays on stream, by the way, and if you guys want to join, you just have to join the stream, and we'll let you know how to join in on the fun. You probably would have seen plenty of Arcane Mages, so think that they're kind of common. Right now, I would say that Fire Mages is the most common, and by the data we have here, Fire Mages are the most common, followed by Frost, and Frost is not everyone's cup of tea by the looks of it, but Arcane still makes up a fairly low number. What I'm seeing here is 0.5% of the total population. Not a lot of Arcane Mages out there, but of course it is a different spec. It does play a little bit differently. It doesn't have the consistency of Fire Mage with, spamming greater pyroblast. If only Arcane Mages had a greater arcane blast, I'm pretty sure everybody would play it if it dealt percentage damage as big as a greater pyro, but Arcane Mages do have to be tricky with their damage. They have to blink around the enemy, you have to outsmart the enemy, you have all these different tools to kind of get around and shimmy around your enemy, but you don't really have massive blasting damage kind of off the bat, off the go, until a little bit later into the fight. So it's a very interesting spec. It has a very good, consistent playstyle if you are able to set it up properly, but that takes a lot of skill. And compared to a Fire Mage that only needs to make sure that at least one greater pyro goes off, which lets you get some great bursts going, and in the right setup with a little bit of CC, you could really go for a kill since greater pyro deals percentage damage. It just still ends up being the easier option. So I was actually quite surprised to see that there's not this many Arcane Mages, and I knew they weren't the most popular spec, but I had a feeling for a while that there was more Arcane Mages than Frost Mages, but turns out that I was wrong. Now the last class on this list, it's kind of a close tie, but I decided to go with Outlaw Rogues. Now, the last tab was going to be something like a Subtlety Rogue, or a Beastmaster Hunter, or a Feral Druid, or an Outlaw Rogue. So in this video, I decided to put up Outlaw. It really came down to choosing between Subtlety Rogues, Outlaw Rogues, Beastmaster Hunters, and Feral Druids. Feral Druids have a 1.2% representation, so they are actually better than any of those other classes. So Feral Druids come out on top, and then it's a choice between Beastmaster Hunter, Sub Rogues, and Outlaw Rogues. As someone who plays Outlaw regularly, I don't see any other Outlaws anywhere in the game. I haven't even ran into an Outlaw by accident, or even somebody queuing Outlaw accidentally. However, there's plenty of Rogue Mage teams, and some of those Rogue Mages might run Assassination Rogues, but could easily run Subtlety Rogues and do just fine. Because Rogue Mage is a very popular comp in 2s as well as in 3s, works with just about any healer as well, and plays super well. You could easily swap out the Assassin Rogue for a sub, but you wouldn't really swap that Assassin Rogue for an Outlaw in most cases. So this is why I decided to go with Outlaw. If you were to talk about Mythic Pluses, Outlaw is everywhere. If you were to talk about raids, Outlaws are actually doing pretty well. And with a massive haste build, you can make a Corruption Outlaw work really well. However, in PvP, there's a lot of things that make Outlaw look kind of scary. First of all, the RNG. Who wants to be rolling into an arena and have a Roll the Bones ability that literally says, hey, take a roll, literally flip a coin, figure out if you are going to be able to do any damage or not at all. So a lot of people mostly stay away from Outlaw because of its lack of consistency. It does have quite a bit of CC, and I love that about it. It has really wildcard style CC that you wouldn't even expect half the time, like the fact that you can throw your ranged kidneys out far more often than any other rogue spec, which can give you a lot more control. But rolling the buffs and using all that CC isn't really worth it when you have something like Assassination and even Subtlety with properly geared. You have quite a bit of CC on demand or quite a bit of on-demand damage literally anytime you want it. This is why I would say that Outlaw Rogue would be one of the specs in PvP that's far less played. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I do hope you guys enjoyed. You guys let me know your thoughts in the comments below, but I do hope you guys really did enjoy this video. If you're someone who wants to make themselves, maybe a bit of a challenge for this last patch, this would be the perfect time to do it. I am a huge fan of playing specs that are generally not that good, that are generally less played, that are generally seen as, not meta, because when you do figure it out, it's super fun. It's just something unique about being able to figure out a spec that everybody else still has a hard time wrapping their heads around, which also is somewhat of an advantage inside of arenas. I mean, what are you supposed to do against a marksmanship hunter? We see Destro Warlocks all the time, we see Fire Mages all the time, hell, we even see Unholy Death Knights plenty. We know what they are trying to do, we know their tricks, we know the strat, we know how to stop them, but with marksmanship hunter, that's a whole new ground. So that element of surprise could give you the advantage. So hopefully this video maybe gave you guys some ideas and maybe even inspired you to try different specs and different builds. Now, corruption is not going to be everyone's cup of tea, but if you look at the positives of corruption, it could lead to many possibilities of a variety of different specs and comps being viable with specific builds, with damage being a lot stronger and higher because of all these corruptions. With not everybody in the world running a tank trinket anymore, there might be some possibility nowadays to be able to push out some great damage and make a variety of different classes and specs work. So I think this would be the perfect time for anybody to take advantage of this new system we have in patch 8.3. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. I do hope you enjoyed. Hopefully this inspires some of you guys to try something different. Thank you all, and I'll see all of you in another video.